It's a strange feeling when your world starts to crack, not with an explosion, but a quiet creak. My name is David, and for 10 years, I thought my marriage to Laura was unshakable. We'd built a life together, careers, a house, dreams of someday. Kids weren't in the picture yet. We'd both agreed to wait until our lives were perfect. Laura is, or was, a journalist for one of the top TV networks in the city. Sharp, ambitious, and incredibly charismatic. I used to joke that she could charm her way out of a speeding ticket with a single smile. Meanwhile, I kept the gears turning as an architect. My life was steady, predictable, and deeply tied to hers. Until a single knock changed everything. It was late, 2 a.m. I'd fallen asleep in my study, a half-empty glass of whiskey on the desk, and blueprints scattered across the table. The knock startled me awake, the sound reverberating through the silence of our quiet suburban street. Laura wasn't home yet, which wasn't entirely unusual. Her assignments sometimes stretched late into the night. Still, something felt off. I opened the door to find two men in dark suits standing on the porch, their expressions grim. One held a plain manila envelope, the kind that seems to carry bad news in every movie I'd ever watched. "Mr. David Turner?" one of them asked. I nodded, my chest tightening. "This is for you," he said, handing me the envelope before turning to leave without another word. I closed the door and stared at it, the weight of the paper suddenly immense in my hand. My gut churned as I opened it, revealing a neatly typed letter and several glossy photos. At first, my mind couldn't process what I was looking at. The images were grainy but unmistakable. Laura, my Laura, walking arm in arm with a man I didn't recognize, entering a luxury hotel. The timestamp was from 2 nights ago, the night she claimed to be covering a late-breaking political scandal downtown. My hands trembled as I flipped through the photos. The last one was the worst. A candid shot of them in the hotel lobby, her lips inches from his, her hand casually resting on his chest. The letter was brief and brutal. "Mr. Turner, you deserve to know the truth. Your wife's affair with this man is not just a personal betrayal. It has compromised her professional integrity as a journalist." More details to follow. The signature at the bottom was typed, "A concerned insider." I sat down heavily on the couch, my mind racing. Who had sent this? Why? And what was I supposed to do with it? I didn't realize I was gripping the photos so tightly until my fingers started to ache. My first instinct was to call Laura, demand answers, confront her. But another part of me, the rational architect who planned every move, told me to wait. I needed to know the full story before I acted. The quiet house suddenly felt suffocating, the walls pressing in as a wave of anger and despair washed over me. For the first time in my life, I doubted everything I thought I knew about the woman I loved. And in that moment, I made a decision. If this betrayal was real, she wouldn't see me coming. The night dragged on in a haze of disbelief. I sat in the living room, staring at the photos, each one a dagger twisting deeper into my gut. Sleep was out of the question, but I needed clarity, not the emotional whirlwind that was pulling me under. By the time Laura came home at 4 a.m., I'd resolved to play it cool. She walked through the door, heels in one hand, phone in the other, her hair slightly disheveled. "Hey, babe," she said, trying for casual, though her voice sounded forced. Crazy night at the newsroom. A senator's press secretary almost had a meltdown on live TV. I studied her, looking for cracks in the performance. She set her things down and kissed me on the cheek, her scent sharp and unfamiliar. Not perfume, cologne. "Everything okay?" she asked, her tone light but probing. I nodded, keeping my face neutral. "Long night." "You could say that," she said, heading toward the kitchen. "I'm starving." "Did you eat?" I couldn't believe her audacity, how easily the lies rolled off her tongue. I forced a smile. "I grabbed something earlier." "You must be exhausted." "Comes with the job," she said, pouring herself a glass of water. "But it'll be worth it once this piece goes live. Career-defining stuff, you know?" She leaned against the counter, sipping her water, completely at ease, as if she hadn't just come from some stranger's arms. I wanted to scream, to demand answers, but I knew it was too soon. I needed to be sure, completely sure. So instead, I kissed her goodnight and went upstairs, leaving her to her charade. The next morning I called in sick to work. There was no way I could focus on anything but this mess. I spent hours trying to piece together the puzzle. Who sent the photos and why? My first instinct was to search Laura's laptop. She rarely locked it, and when I opened it, my stomach clenched. Her emails and browsing history had been wiped clean, as if she'd been preparing for this moment. But there were cracks in her meticulous facade. Her calendar still had the remnants of her real schedule, meetings that didn't align with the late night she claimed to spend at the newsroom. A quick search of the hotel from the photos revealed it wasn't far from her usual reporting haunts. I jotted everything down, creating a timeline. If she wanted to lie, I'd catch her in it. Then, as I was rifling through her desk drawer, I found the first real clue. A receipt for dinner at the hotel restaurant dated 2 nights ago, the same night as the photos. 2 meals, no names, but the timestamp aligned perfectly. I folded the receipt and slipped it into my wallet. My heart was pounding, but my head felt clearer than it had in days. By the 3rd day, I'd built enough of a picture to know that Laura's betrayal was deeper than I'd initially thought. The man from the photos, let's call him Mr. Gray, wasn't just some fling. He was a producer at her network. A quick LinkedIn search confirmed it. I debated confronting her, but the same instinct that kept me from exploding that first night held me back. I needed an edge, something she couldn't deny. That's when I got an email. The sender was anonymous, but the subject line read, "You're not crazy, David." Inside was a single sentence. "Meet me at the Silver Coffee House at noon tomorrow. I have information you'll want." The email was signed a concerned insider. It could have been a trap, but my gut told me otherwise. I had nothing to lose. The next day, I arrived at the coffee shop early. A young woman approached me, looking both nervous and determined. "David Turner?" I nodded. "Who are you?" "My name's Alyssa. I work with Laura." Her voice was low, her eyes scanning the room like she was being watched. She slid into the booth across from me. "Look, I don't know how much you know, but what she's doing, it's not just personal. It's professional suicide." "What do you mean?" "Laura and Gray," she said, her voice dripping with contempt. "It's been going on for months. Everyone at the station knows, but nobody says anything because he's the golden boy. She's risking everything for him, her reputation, her career. And now she's dragging the rest of us down with her." I leaned in, my heart pounding. "Why are you telling me this?" "Because I'm sick of watching it happen," she said. "I liked Laura. I still do, or at least I did before this. But she's not who you think she is, and she's going to take you down with her if you don't act." She slid a small USB drive across the table. "This has everything. Emails, photos, audio clips. Proof. Use it however you want." I stared at the drive, then back at her. "Why help me?" She smirked, but there was no humor in it. "Let's just say I believe in karma." That night, I plugged the USB drive into my laptop and watched the truth unfold. Emails between Laura and Gray, discussing meetings at the hotel. Photos of them at industry events, their touches too intimate to be professional. Even a voicemail from Laura, her voice low and sultry, asking Gray to meet her after work. I sat back in my chair, the weight of it all pressing down on me. My wife, the woman I thought I knew better than anyone, had built an entire second life behind my back. But now I had the upper hand. For the first time since this nightmare began, I smiled. If she wanted to play games, she'd learned that I wasn't the man she thought she'd married. When I plugged the USB drive into my laptop, the screen flickered to life, revealing a directory of neatly organized folders. Each one was labeled in bold, clinical terms. Emails, photos, videos, recordings. I hesitated, my hand hovering over the trackpad. A voice in my head told me to stop, to pull the drive out and walk away, but the weight in my chest wouldn't let me. I clicked on the first folder, photos. The thumbnails filled the screen like a punch to the gut. The images were sharper and clearer than the grainy photos I'd been sent before. They told a story that was both explicit and devastating. The first showed Laura seated at an elegant restaurant, her hand resting intimately on Gray's thigh under the table. Her face was lit with a smile I hadn't seen in years, radiant, unguarded, and directed at someone who wasn't me. The next was even worse. Laura and Gray on a balcony, her arms draped around his neck, their foreheads touching as if sharing a private joke. A sunset cast them in a romantic glow, a scene ripped from the fantasies of a love-struck teenager. Then came the bedroom photos. I recoiled, my stomach churning. The angles were suggestive, but clear enough to confirm what I feared most. The sheets were rumpled, Laura's hair messy, and her body wrapped in nothing but a blanket as Gray leaned over her with a smug grin. I closed the folder, my breathing shallow. It felt like the walls of my study were closing in. I clicked on recordings, my hand trembling. The first file was an audio recording, scratchy but unmistakable. It was Laura's voice, breathy and laughing. "You're terrible," she whispered, her tone playful and intimate. Gray's voice followed, low and smooth. "Only for you. You bring it out in me." The laughter that followed was hers, carefree and unfamiliar, like she'd completely shed the version of herself I knew. Another file played a different tone, angrier, more desperate. "David won't find out," Laura snapped, her voice sharp. "He's so predictable. He wouldn't even know where to start looking." My chest tightened as I skipped to the next file. "We could go public," Gray said. "Why not? Let's stop hiding. He's not your future. I am. I just need more time," Laura responded, her voice softer now, almost pleading. "David's stable, and stable's useful. But you're what I want." Her words echoed in my head, a steady drumbeat of betrayal. Finally, I clicked on the folder marked videos. The first file opened, and I wished it hadn't. It was security footage from the hotel lobby. Laura and Gray strolled in hand, oblivious to the world around them. They paused near the elevator, where Gray pulled her into an embrace, his hands roaming freely. She didn't resist. Instead, she tilted her head up and kissed him deeply. The second video made ball rise in my throat. It was from a hidden camera, the perspective slightly tilted as it captured the inside of a hotel suite. Laura sat on the edge of the bed, laughing as she held a glass of champagne. Gray stood behind her, massaging her shoulders, his lips brushing against her neck. I slammed the laptop shut, unable to watch anymore. I sat in the darkened room, staring at the blank screen, my mind swirling with disbelief and fury. My wife, the woman I'd built my life around, had torn it all apart. And for what? A man with a flashy smile and empty promises? Her words from the recordings echoed in my head, each one sharper than the last. "Stable's useful, but you're what I want." The air felt thick, heavy with despair, but beneath it all, something darker stirred. A burning anger took root, feeding on every image, every word, every laugh I'd just witnessed. This wasn't just betrayal. It was humiliation. It was destruction. And I wasn't going to let her walk away unscathed. The despair gave way to a clarity I hadn't felt in days. If she wanted to dismantle our life, I'd make sure she felt every piece crumble in her hands. I reopened the laptop and began to copy the files. The USB drive wasn't just evidence, it was ammunition. This wasn't over. The morning light crept through the blinds, illuminating the USB drive on my desk like some twisted artifact of truth. Laura had built her betrayal carefully, threading lies through the fabric of our lives. But every lie had a weakness, and I was going to find them all. Revenge, I knew, required patience. Impulsiveness would ruin everything. I had to dismantle her world piece by piece, like unbuilding a skyscraper, one beam at a time, until the structure collapsed under its own weight. The first call I made was to Kevin, a no-nonsense divorce attorney known for his vicious tactics. He didn't care about sob stories or morality. He cared about winning. When I handed him the USB drive at our initial meeting, his reaction was immediate. "This is a lawyer's dream," he said, skimming the contents. "Emails, photos, audio. This isn't just evidence, it's a weapon. With this, she won't get a dime, and if you want, we can make sure she's publicly humiliated too." "That's exactly what I want," I said, my voice devoid of emotion. "I want her to lose everything, professionally, socially, financially. She doesn't just walk away from this." Kevin smiled, leaning back in his chair. "Then buckle up, David. You're about to see what revenge looks like when it's done right." The USB drive was only the tip of the iceberg. I needed more. Something undeniable, so airtight that Laura couldn't twist the narrative. Her lies had been woven so tightly into our lives that they'd become second nature to her. But every liar slips up eventually, and I was determined to catch her. I started with her digital trail. I knew her habits well, her passwords, her routines, even her favorite hiding spots for personal files. She wasn't as clever as she thought. Her laptop, unlocked during her hurried mornings, was a treasure trove. I cloned her hard drive, transferring its contents to an external disk. Emails, calendar entries, drafts of work documents, it was all there. What I found was worse than I expected. Gray wasn't her only secret. Laura had been manipulating our finances too. She'd been funneling small amounts from our joint account into a personal account she hadn't told me about. The transactions were small enough to avoid suspicion, but over time, they added up. Next, I turned my focus to her movements. Laura's lies relied on the assumption that I was too trusting or too busy to notice the details. She was wrong. I installed a GPS tracker in her car and a hidden camera in the house. It felt invasive, but this wasn't about morality anymore. It was about justice. The first week of surveillance was uneventful. Late nights at the newsroom, early morning coffee runs, phone calls in the driveway. But then she slipped. One Tuesday night, she left the house at 10 p.m., claiming she had a last-minute meeting about an upcoming political segment. The tracker told a different story. She drove to a boutique hotel across town, staying there for over 3 hours. The hidden camera captured her returning home, her lipstick smudged, her blouse unbuttoned at the collar. She didn't even bother sneaking in. I saved every detail. Timestamps, tracker logs, video footage. It was all building towards something. My biggest breakthrough came when I reached out to Alyssa, one of Laura's coworkers. Alyssa had been the one to leave the USB drive in the first place, but I suspected she had more to share. We met at a coffee shop far from the city center, the kind of place where nobody asked questions. I knew this would get messy, Alyssa said, sliding a folder across the table. Gray's been getting away with this crap for years. Laura's just the latest accessory. I opened the folder. Inside were damning emails between Gray and Laura, along with documents implicating Gray in multiple harassment claims. Alyssa had highlighted key sections: flirtatious messages, mentions of private dinners, and settlements quietly paid out by the network to silence other victims. She's not innocent, Alyssa continued, but Gray's the real monster here. He's destroyed careers, ruined lives. You want to take them down? You'll need to use this. I nodded, feeling a grim satisfaction. This will do. With Alyssa's folder and my growing arsenal of evidence, the pieces started falling into place. My revenge wasn't just about Laura anymore. It was about burning the entire facade she'd built to the ground. Kevin and I devised a strategy. The divorce would be the opening act, cutting her off financially and exposing her lies to her family and friends. But the main event would be the professional fallout. Gray and Laura had built their careers on secrecy and manipulation. My goal was to make those secrets public. I didn't just want to end my marriage. I wanted to end their worlds. With the foundation laid, it was time to tighten the noose around Laura and Gray. Revenge wasn't just about getting even, it was about making them feel the weight of their choices. The plan was unfolding, and each step brought me closer to tearing down everything they'd built. The burner email I'd sent with Alyssa's evidence had done its job, and rumors of an internal investigation swirled through the network. I could see the tension in Laura when she came home. Her usual confidence had cracks. Her late-night text sessions with Gray were tinged with panic. She'd pace the living room, her phone pressed to her ear, whispering in hurried tones. I recorded everything. Her nervous behavior, her slip-ups when talking about her work stress. Even the nights she came home reeking of hotel soap. The GPS tracker and surveillance cameras provided the rest, building a timeline of her lies. I didn't confront her. Not yet. I wanted her to think she was in control, to dig herself deeper into the hole she'd created. Kevin had been busy. By now, he'd not only prepared divorce papers, but had also built a strategy to link the trial to Laura's infidelity. This isn't just about the affair, Kevin said during one of our late-night meetings. Gray's lawsuit against the network will pull her into the spotlight. We'll tie her lies to his, forcing her to defend herself on multiple fronts. By the time this is over, she'll be financially and professionally ruined. Good, I said. Make it hurt. Kevin leaned forward. There's one more thing. The account she's been siphoning money into? I've tracked it. If we present this as financial misconduct during the divorce proceedings, we can argue she's been draining marital assets. She'll lose any claim to alimony, and we might even get her to repay what she took. I smiled, feeling the icy satisfaction of the plan falling into place. Do it. The burner emails had stirred the pot, but I wasn't done yet. I leaked a second batch of evidence, this time directly implicating Gray and Laura in the affair. Emails, surveillance footage, and financial records were sent to a well-known investigative journalist. The result was devastating. Headlines began to appear. Major network rocked by scandal. Producer and anchor under investigation. The article didn't name Laura outright, but left no doubt as to who the anchor was. The affair was described in damning detail, with mentions of favoritism, ethical breaches, and a toxic workplace culture. Laura came home that night looking like a ghost. David, she said, her voice trembling. Something's happening at work. Someone's spreading lies about Gray and me. It's ridiculous. None of it's true. I stared at her, feigning concern. Who would do such a thing? I don't know, she said, pacing. Gray says it's an inside job. Someone's out to get us. Us. The word hung in the air. I nodded slowly. I'm sure the truth will come out. Gray's lawsuit against the network was the opportunity I'd been waiting for. He sued for wrongful termination, claiming that the evidence against him was fabricated and that he was the victim of defamation. Laura, desperate to salvage her career, agreed to testify on his behalf. The courtroom was packed with journalists and onlookers eager for every sordid detail. Kevin and I sat at the plaintiff's table, ready to watch the spectacle unfold. The trial opened with Gray's team painting him as a victim, a brilliant producer brought down by a smear campaign. Laura's testimony was key to his defense, and when she took the stand, she looked polished and composed, wearing a modest dress and a neutral expression. Mrs. Turner, Gray's lawyer, began. Can you describe your working relationship with Mr. Gray? Of course, Laura said, her voice steady. We were colleagues. Our relationship was professional, built on mutual respect. And the allegations of an affair? Completely false, she said, her tone indignant. These accusations are baseless and malicious. Kevin leaned over to me and whispered, she's walking into a trap. When it was Kevin's turn to cross-examine Laura, the atmosphere shifted. He approached the witness stand with the calm confidence of a predator stalking its prey. Mrs. Turner, he began, holding up a document. Can you confirm this is your email to Mr. Gray, dated June 14th? Laura hesitated, her composure slipping. Yes, but let me read it for the court, Kevin interrupted. You're the only one who understands me. I can't wait to see you tonight. The courtroom buzzed with whispers. Laura's lawyer objected, but the judge allowed it. Kevin continued, pulling up a series of photos. And these images, taken from hotel surveillance, show you and Mr. Gray entering a suite on multiple occasions. Are you still denying the affair? Laura's face turned pale. Those photos, they're misleading. We were discussing work. Kevin smirked, playing the next piece of evidence, an audio recording from the USB. Laura's voice filled the courtroom. David stable. But you're what I want. The room fell silent. Laura looked as though she might collapse. Kevin pressed forward. Mrs. Turner, would you like to revise your statement about the nature of your relationship with Mr. Gray? She stammered, unable to form a coherent response. The jury's expressions shifted from skepticism to judgment. The trial concluded with a decisive blow to Gray and Laura. The court ruled against Gray, citing overwhelming evidence of his misconduct. He was ordered to pay damages to the network and his victims, his reputation in shreds. Laura's credibility was annihilated. The affair, the lies, the recordings, it all came crashing down. Her testimony was dismissed as unreliable, and the judge openly criticized her involvement in the scandal. The fallout was immediate. The network terminated her contract, issuing a statement about maintaining ethical standards. Media outlets published scathing articles, painting her as a cautionary tale of ambition gone wrong. When we left the courthouse, Laura approached me in the parking lot. She looked like a shadow of herself, her makeup smudged, her eyes hollow. "David, please," she begged, tears streaming down her face. "I've lost everything. I can't do this alone. Don't leave me." I stared at her, the woman I once thought I'd spend my life with. "You left me the moment you chose him," I said coldly. "This is on you, Laura." Her sobs echoed as I walked away, feeling lighter with each step. With the trial behind us, the divorce proceedings moved quickly. Kevin ensured we came out swinging. Armed with the evidence of Laura's affair and her financial misconduct, we left her with no room to negotiate. During the hearing, Laura's lawyer attempted to argue for alimony, claiming she had been emotionally devastated by the trial and the loss of her career. Kevin was ruthless in his response. "Your Honor, the plaintiff's financial woes are entirely self-inflicted. She diverted marital funds to a hidden account, which we have documented in these statements." He handed a thick folder to the judge, flipping to key pages. "She has also demonstrated a pattern of deceit, not only against my client, but in a court of law during the recent defamation trial." The judge reviewed the evidence, her expression cold and unmoving. "This is damning," she said, her tone firm. "Mrs. Turner, you will not receive alimony. Furthermore, any funds taken from the joint account must be reimbursed." Laura sat across the courtroom, staring down at the table. Her lawyer whispered something to her, but she didn't respond. For the first time, she looked truly defeated. The ruling was swift. I was awarded the house, the majority of our savings, and even a portion of her freelance income to cover legal fees. Laura walked away with nothing but her personal belongings. After the ruling, Laura approached me in the hallway, her eyes rimmed with tears. "David," she whispered, her voice breaking, "you're destroying me." I met her gaze, my voice calm. "You destroyed yourself. I'm just making sure the world sees it." Laura's fall from grace was absolute. The once respected journalist who commanded attention in every room was now a pariah. No reputable network would touch her. Even small outlets avoided her name like the plague. She tried to pivot to freelance work, but her reputation preceded her. Clients canceled contracts the moment they learned about her involvement in the scandal. Financially, she was in ruins. The secret account she'd siphoned money into was drained to pay legal fees and reimburse the joint account. She sold her car and moved into her sister's spare bedroom, a far cry from the lifestyle she once flaunted. Socially, she was isolated. Friends who once admired her ambition now avoided her calls. Even her family distanced themselves, tired of the drama she had brought into their lives. Her parents, once proud of their successful daughter, quietly expressed disappointment. She was alone in every sense of the word. Months later, I received an email from Laura. The subject line read, "An apology." Against my better judgment, I opened it. "I don't know if you'll ever forgive me. I don't expect you to, but I need you to know that I regret everything. Losing you wasn't just losing a husband. It was losing my best friend, my anchor. I was selfish, and I destroyed the best thing I ever had. I hope you found peace. You deserve it. Laura." I stared at the screen for a long moment, the words swirling in my mind. The woman who had shattered my world was now acknowledging her guilt, but it didn't move me. Forgiveness wasn't what I sought. It was freedom, and I already had that. I deleted the email without replying. With the divorce finalized and Laura's shadow no longer looming over my life, I made the decision to start fresh. I sold the house we'd shared and moved to a new city, taking a job at a prestigious architecture firm. The work was fulfilling, challenging in ways that pushed me to rebuild not just my career but myself. I kept my personal life private, avoiding relationships for a while. Healing took time, but slowly, I began to rediscover who I was outside of my marriage. I joined a gym, reconnected with old friends, and even started painting again, something I hadn't done since college. One evening, as I stood on the balcony of my new apartment, watching the city lights flicker below, I felt an overwhelming sense of peace. Laura had taken so much from me, but she hadn't destroyed me. If anything, I was stronger for having endured it. Through mutual friends, I heard about Laura's continued struggles. She tried to rebuild her career, even launching a blog to stay relevant, but it never gained traction. Rumors swirled that she'd taken a job at a small PR firm, far removed from the spotlight she once craved. Emotionally, she was still reeling. Her bitterness became a running theme in conversations with the few friends who hadn't cut ties. She blamed Gray for leading her astray, the network for abandoning her, and even me for being unforgiving. But I wasn't interested in her excuses. Her suffering wasn't my victory. It was simply the natural consequence of her actions. The scars of Laura's betrayal would always be there, faint reminders of a life I'd left behind. But they no longer defined me. I'd built something new, something stronger, and I wasn't looking back. Laura had underestimated me, thinking I'd crumble under the weight of her lies. Instead, I'd risen, turning her betrayal into my triumph. And in the end, that was the best revenge of all.